Our speaker today, Karl Keel, he's a Public Works Director here for the City of Bloomington for the last 9 years. Public Works here in Bloomington has some 200 employees, 3 divisions, engineering, utilities, and maintenance. Activities include engineering, construction, street and park maintenance, water and sewer, fleet services, facility maintenance, and recently added garbage collection. Actually not quite started yet, but soon to begin. We're getting in the business of garbage collection. Also, he has degrees in, yeah, there's an applause from that, huh, in the back there. He has degrees in civil engineering and architecture from the University of Minnesota, over 30 years of experience in public works between MnDOT, the cities of Roseville, Shoreview, and here in Bloomington. And he also did some consulting work for engineering. Lives in Roseville with his wife, who's a Lincoln grad. Apparently the second year before it closed, his wife graduated from Lincoln High School here in Bloomington. They have 2 kids, one of which is a daughter who's in college, a son who's in high school. Karl grew up in Prior Lake and can remember the thrill of passing trucks, on the Old Cedar Bridge. So with that, Karl Keel, our Public Works Director, is going to give us an update on the Old Cedar Bridge.
Thank you, Jeff. So I think all of you are probably familiar with the Old Cedar Bridge if you've been around. This is located on the eastern side of town, just south of the Mall of America. That's an aerial photograph. The Minnesota River is kind of on the bottom portion there. This is the new Cedar Avenue, the new freeway section. The Old Cedar Avenue Bridge is located immediately west of the new bridge and freeway system, and it doesn't actually cross the Minnesota River. It crosses Long Meadow Lake, located in this direction. This is probably how most of us see it when we look at it from the freeway section, a rather majestic old steel structure that crosses a large wetland area. Really, this has been is an important facility in the community. First off, it has been and will be, when it's finished, a important pedestrian crossing of the river valley and of Long Meadow Lake. It provides good access into the Wildlife Refuge that surrounds it. And it is part of the historic register of historic places, so it has a significant historic portion to it. And I think most people, and as kind of evidenced by the painting on the bottom, this is a subject of many, many pictures and paintings, and is really a local icon. This is a picture from the original plan for the bridge, and it's technically called a 5-span camel-backed through truss bridge, is the technical term for the bridge. It was built originally in 1920 by Hennepin County and became part of the highway system. It was actually abandoned when the new bridge was constructed in 1979 and turned over to the city for ownership. The city closed it to traffic because of the structural condition in 1993, and then actually to all traffic, including pedestrians and bicyclists, in 2002. And I'll show some pictures of its condition that will kind of show why that was closed. So since its closure, we've been working on trying to figure out a new solution for this. So this has been a long project coming. And really the reason that we're looking at it is it's in pretty darn bad shape currently. These are some pictures of the understructure steel, and you can see it's very much corroded. In many parts, you could actually put your hand through the old steel structure. And again, a number of pictures of the poor condition. Another significant problem is that the points where the spans bear on the piers, we call them the bearing points, they're all completely corroded and they're fused together, which is a bad thing for bridges. The concrete piers also are very much deteriorated. This is a picture of one of those piers in very poor condition. The porch swing was not original to the structure. So as we were putting together different projects or different types of projects to remedy this, there's really 3 kind of areas that are of concern that we had to try to balance. The first is funding. Obviously, this is a very expensive project, and so the funding that we've looked at over the last 20 years kind of were combinations of federal grants, state grants, and local monies. Also, because this crosses the river valley and goes through a federal wildlife sanctuary, there's all kinds of regulatory agencies that weigh in, from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to the Corps of Engineers to the DNR, state DNR. And so we had to balance those regulations as we put together different project proposals. And the third being the historic nature of this, which is SHPO is the State Historic Preservation Office. That's a state agency. MnDOT and the federal agency also have a say in the historic preservation of this structure. And really the question on the historic side had a lot to do with do we replace the bridge or do we renovate the bridge as it exists today? So our first proposal was to replace the bridge back in 1995. And that worked quite well from a regulation point of view and from the historic point of view. Back then, the historic groups were allowing the replacement of that bridge, but we didn't have enough money to do it. So that solution kind of fell by the wayside. In 1997, we looked at a berm solution, which was less expensive. That was, we could actually build a new roadway through the rather shallow portion of that wetland. And so we could afford that, but we weren't able to get the regulatory approvals for that. Moving along in 2003, again, we went back to replacing it, and we had the money at that point. Regulations were okay, but at that point, the historic folks had sort of changed their tune on whether it was acceptable to replace the structure, and they were saying that really the only thing that we could do would be to renovate it, which at a much higher cost. So we came up with a renovation project at that point, and as we expected, the historic would work, but we didn't have enough money to do it. So kind of this is a long story. So actually in 2013, all things aligned. And really the funding came from a special legislation that we received in 2013 that provided monies that were associated with some of the funding for the Mall of America project that filled the gap in funding to allow us to do a renovation project. So the project has two components. One is the actual restoration of the bridge itself, and the other is a package of amenities that will support the bridge, and kind of a list of the things that the bridge renovation project includes. The first part was to relocate a rather important fiber line that runs right adjacent to the bridge. We had to relocate that. The project will include a new concrete deck and a new railing system. It will also be painted a gray color, not the rust color that it is today. The amenities package, we're going to build a kind of a multi-use building that'll have a bathroom facility and a small gathering space underneath it, a number of trail connections, as well as some projects with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, including the reconstruction of their parking lot. This is a drawing of the west side of the bridge, or kind of the Bloomington side, if you will. The bridge project itself is shown here, and the new bathroom and restroom facility, is located here. Note that this is a location of an old homestead site, kind of an early homestead. It's a little knoll. It's one of the areas that floods the least in this area. This entire area does flood on large events, but the driest portion is that portion where we're going to put the restroom facility. Also, there's kind of a natural swale that will be developed as a small amphitheater area that will be used by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for some of their educational programs. A new entry area where buses will be able to drop off school kids, and there'll be some kind of entry features there, as well as the U.S. Fish and Wildlife's parking lot. This is a portion of the project that they will be paying for, but we will be building as part of our project. This is what we hope the new restroom facility will look like, and it'll have, as I say, a covered area for folks to get out of the rain or the sun, and also for groups of students to gather. If you're looking towards the bridge from the existing parking lot, this is what you see. And this is kind of an approximation of what we hope it will look like when we're finished with our project. The total project cost is approximately $23 million. The bridge itself is close to $20 million, and the amenity package approximately $3 million. And there's quite a complicated funding package for this. It includes state bonding monies, some federal grants, includes some fiscal disparities TIF. This is the monies that come out of that special legislation in 2013. Local funds, and some other additional development funds from our South Loop Development District. So I have a number of pictures of construction. Really, the first part of construction was to build a platform to the south of the existing bridge that large construction equipment could be used to renovate the bridge. So this is the beginning of that new, in a sense, a parallel bridge being built through the wetland. And I have a series of pictures of that as it's being built. So I would note that this structure is a very heavy-duty structure and needs to be built strong enough to handle a lot of large construction equipment that's needed for the bridge. Another part of this project is to build these small little piers that are going to be used to build temporary false work that's going to be used to actually lift the bridge off its piers to be renovated. And I'll show you those as we go along. Again, this is that false work that is designed such that we can actually lift the bridge off its moorings so that we can repair it. A picture again of that false work kind of intertwined through the bridge. What's interesting about this is that there are a number of piers. These are just wooden piers that are underneath the bridge. These are actually from a 1990s bridge that predated the Old Cedar Avenue Bridge, and they still remain today. That was an old wooden bridge that had deteriorated rather quickly. Again, seeing that false work from a distance. One of the main activities in renovating the bridge is to repair all the steel that is rusted or bent. And so this started out with kind of taking apart the joints at the various portions of the bridge. And kind of note that the original bridge was built with steel rivets that held all the pieces together. And I'll speak a little bit more about that later. Also bending some of the pieces that had been hit by trucks in the past. So this is a process called heat bending, where they actually heat up the members and pull them with large pieces of equipment to straighten them. And some of the bridge components were actually rusted beyond repair and had to be replaced. So this is a gusset plate at one of the bearing points that was fabricated to replace some of the steel that had pretty much rusted away in the old structure. That's that same piece of steel that's in place. And here you would make note that we don't have rivets, but we actually have bolts. And I'll talk to those in a moment as well. Project also included, I noted that all the bearing points had been rusted completely shut. So it includes new stainless steel bearing points at all the important points on the structure. And a number of the actual steel beams had to be replaced. This is a new beam that's put in place. This is probably the biggest thing going on in the river valley, and there's quite a bit of attention. So this is one of the group of spectators that has been congregating to watch the project as it moves along. Another main component is the reconstruction of those concrete piers. So this construction involved the building of a wall, a barrier around, and the water was pulled out from here, and the muck was pulled out so that we could get to these concrete footings, or the piers, and had to reconstruct those. So there's a series of pictures of how that was accomplished. So again, rebuilding those piers. So this is the old bridge, looking at the old bridge, and as part of this project, because it included a number of federal dollars and federal permits, The historic folks are watching it very carefully and are really scrutinizing every point of our construction and our design. And so you will note on this picture that the railings are kind of old steel railings. And there was a lot of conversation about what happens to those railings because they're too low for the intended purpose. We're going to be having bicyclists crossing this, so we really need a rail that's much higher. So there was a lot of work done to try to determine what would be a design that was in keeping with the historic nature of this structure, but also utilize or be appropriate for the new use for bicyclists. And so really this is the solution was a higher rail, but that has a rail underneath it that matches the old rail. So I talked a little bit about the bolts and the connections. So the original structure was built with rivets. And these were constructed, actually heated up on site, and there was craftsmen that were very good at putting in hot rivets. That's a trade that's really no longer available in the marketplace. There are a few hot riveters, but they're in high demand and the cost is extremely high. So again, with the historic agencies, there was a long conversation about what the appropriate connections would be. So there must have been about 5 or 6 memos that went back and forth about rivets alone. The hex bolt is probably the industry standard for connections today. And so I think the compromise solution was a button head bolt, which looks kind of like a rivet, but acts as a regular bolt. So that's what's being put into the bridge today, are the hex or the button head bolts. Another historic issue had to do with the actual concrete and the finishing of the concrete used on the abutments. This is a picture from the 1920s of the original abutments, and they did not perform very well, and they had actually been replaced twice since the original construction. The historic folks were very concerned about our renovation project, and they wanted to make sure that the actual finish on the concrete that we were using was similar to the original structure. So we spent a lot of time analyzing this picture, trying to figure out the grain and size of the materials used in the forming, and actually put together about 3 or 4 samples where we actually cast sample pieces with different types of wood to try to get the proper wood that had a wide enough grain to simulate the grain in the original forming of the bridge abutments. Again, my point here is that this has been sort of a unique project in that every step of the way we've had to be extremely careful about all the details associated, trying to balance the historic nature of the structure with kind of practical needs for the use of the structure and for available construction methods. Also dug a lot of holes looking for artifacts. So this is a gentleman that's been an archaeologist doing a dig. We did find in a number of areas a bunch of rocks, they look like to me, but they're actually lithic depotage, which is my understanding is a fancy term for construction debris, ancient construction debris. Apparently this area of the river valley was used to gather stones that would be suitable for tool making. And so what these stones were not the actual stones that were made into tools, but rather stones that were discarded by the folks that were looking for stones. They would typically break a stone. If it was suitable for tool making, they would put it into their satchel and go to their camp and actually make the tools. But this construction debris, kind of an ancient construction landfill, if you will, is left in this site. And so as we were developing our design, as we proceed through construction, we've had to adjust it to try to either avoid these areas where we found these materials or to document where they are and to map them out. So it's slowed construction considerably. So project began in the summer of 2015. It was actually delayed by about 3 months for some difficulties of moving a large fiber optic line. We expect to begin the amenities, that's the park structure and the things that are happening on the west side of the bridge this coming summer. All to be completed about approximately a year and a half from now in the summer of 2017. So, would note that there's a lot of pictures on our website that's at bloomingtonmn.gov that are available, and there's also a Facebook page that you can reach from that same site that we're posting kind of updated construction pictures as we move along. And with that, that's the end of my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Just curiosity, how much was the replacement cost if it was replaced new rather than keeping the old?
The replacement cost would have been more in the range of about $8 million. So considerably less. It was probably almost a third of the original cost. The other thing that we had looked at that was very important to us was that the cost of long-term maintenance. Obviously, it would cost less to maintain a new structure than it would an old structure. So that figured into the cost difference as well.
Where did those historians come from to justify this?
You may have caught that early in the process, the historic community would have allowed us to replace the structure. And so I think the way to describe that is there's kind of a pendulum swing of the influence of historic preservation in the industry. At one point, back when we first started the project, we were tearing down a lot of old bridges in the state. And so really the pendulum was swung to one side. I think the pendulum has swung to the preservation side currently, and we're spending a great deal of extra money on preservation projects. But that's, if we wanted to do this project, that was really the only way we could do it. Yes?
Are they going to remove each cross-section from its current pier setting so that you can replace the pivot points while you're doing the pier replacement there?
Yes, that false work that I described actually lifts up that whole section, so it sits off its piers. The repair will be done on it at the same time as the piers are being constructed or reconstructed. Yes, sir.
Will there be well, how many parking spaces, and will there be a fee for access or for parking?
I don't know the exact number. There's about 50 spaces that exist there today. The new lot will be approximately the same size, and there will be no fees for parking. Neil.
Karl, can you tell us what happens on the south side of the bridge? I mean, once you cross the bridge, are you connecting up to other trails, or what's going on the other side?
So a number of things on the other side. Currently today, if you cross the bridge, you would go down to the new Cedar Avenue Bridge across the river, and there is actually a pedestrian bridge that's attached to that bridge. So there is a way to cross currently the river, and that will remain. In the future also, we are currently working with the DNR to construct a new trail along the north side of the river called the Minnesota River Trail. And that is to be constructed pretty much concurrently with the end of this project. So there will be a state regional trail on the south side of the bridge that this will connect to.
Where will that go? I mean, can you go all the way down?
That will go eventually from Fort Snelling down to actually Mankato.
Okay.
Currently, I think it runs roughly from the Bloomington Ferry Bridge on the west side of town down to Belle Plaine.
Are there campsites along that regional trail?
I'm not sure of that. There may be on the southern portion, kind of towards Belle Plaine, there might be a few. There's none planned, and I don't believe there will be any through Bloomington.
Another question on the south side, is that Bloomington? That's not Bloomington.
That is still Bloomington on the south side of the bridge. The border between Bloomington and Burnsville is the middle of the river. Yeah. So again, this bridge crosses Long Meadow Lake, which is the backwater, if you will. And then to cross the river, you have to go up on the existing bridge to cross the river. And the border is halfway between the river. Yes, sir.
The span from one side to the other, how long is the bridge?
Totally approximately 850 feet. Each span is 170 feet, roughly speaking.
Karl, do you have a map that shows where the landing is on the south side that Jim was talking about on the Burnsville side? Is there something that demonstrates to us how it lands still in Bloomington?
Yes, I think so.
It may not be important unless we can charge them a toll.
So currently, this is the Old Cedar Bridge. And the border between Bloomington and Burnsville is through the middle of the river, approximately here. So when you cross the bridge, you go down a trail, and there is a bridge strapped onto the highway bridge, a pedestrian bridge existing. So you go up this bridge across the east side and then down. So that's the landing on the Burnsville side.
What was there historically?
Now, historically, there was a swing bridge there, And that was removed at the time the new bridge was built in roughly 1979.
So that's the historical pictures we see where ships or boat traffic's going through.
You're either seeing that one or you're seeing the one that exists still today on the south side of Normandale Boulevard. That is a swing bridge too. So there was 2 swing bridges.
Yes.
How much historical oversight is there with respect to this reconstruction? Is it just here's the design and go forward, or is there ongoing, review from a historical?
There is, again, because this project has federal dollars and it goes through a federally owned property, you have to meet the historic requirements. So there was a huge amount of historic input in the design process, and there's a fairly large kind of ongoing scrutiny during construction. So as we're pulling apart the joints, we have to make a decision, well, are we going to replace portions of this joint, or are we going to repair them? From our point of view, we would like to replace them because we're trying to make it as strong and last as long as possible. The historic folks want us to replace as little as possible. So every time we have to make a decision about how we're going to handle a given joint, there's a conversation about, well, do you absolutely have to, or can you get by with less? So to your point, there's a great deal of scrutiny during construction. So the problem with that is it costs us more, which is of concern, but equally important is that it slows the project down considerably. Yes?
Karl, if I'm biking across this bridge then, and I get to the south side, and I want to cross the river, is that a stairway or is that a ramp situation?
It's a series of ramps that move up.
A series of ramps.
Yes. So you can ride you can probably, I don't know if you can ride your bike up, but you can push your bike up there. Yeah. Yes?
Will this continue to flood now because that's been frequent in Bloomington?
It will continue to flood.
Managing protection for that.
The bridge itself, we estimate probably floods about once or twice a decade. The water gets high enough in a flood condition that it actually inundates the bridge. That will still happen. There was a discussion made about what the appropriate bridge deck type would be. Currently, the bridge deck is a wooden bridge deck, and so people think that that's the original bridge deck was a wooden bridge deck. Actually, the original bridge deck was a concrete bridge deck, which was replaced probably in the 40s. We made a decision to go to the original because it would be better suited for flooding. All right.
So because the bridge was on the National Register of Historic Places, is it an option at all to just tear down the bridge if you wanted to build a new one? Was the choice made to preserve the historic character?
The fact that the bridge was on the historic register really doesn't impact the decision at all, one way or the other, about replace or renovate. Really, the question about renovating it or replacing it has to do with receiving SHPO approval, that's the State Historic Preservation Office approval, of the plans that you submit, and they're involved because there's federal dollars involved in the project. The criteria that they have to use is there's a vague term that says that a solution, if there is a prudent and feasible solution to repair the bridge, you have to do that rather than replace it. And so in the past, many years ago, that standard was held loosely, and so it was rather easy to say if it cost twice as much actually there was a rule that said if it cost 80% as much as replacing it, you had to go with replacement, meaning the threshold was very low for replacement. Currently, this is a testament to how much the pendulum has swung. We're roughly 3 times the cost to renovate as it is to replace, and yet they are still able to say that is a prudent solution. So, yes?
What's the status of the trail connections? Will they be available by the end of this summer? Or?
The main trail connection will be the state trail, which will be a trail that will be built along the south side here, along the north side of the river on the south of the bridge. MnDOT is currently developing plans for that facility, and construction is slated to begin next year on that. They have some funding issues, and I'm not sure if that's going to actually all be completed all as one project, but in the relatively near future, we will see that main connection done. We will build, as part of our project, we will build this trail link that happens here, and as part of the reconstruction of Old Cedar Avenue, we will build a trail along there. That will connect to a trail that you may have seen along Old Cedar Avenue on the west side, which is called the Nokomis Minnesota Valley Trail, which is a regional trail being built by Hennepin County.
Karl.
A little history. Governor Ann Lanchesky had a big part in getting this kind of pushed through finally in 2013. And I woke up after a council meeting with some of the decisions that were made thinking it was Christmas, because it really, it went through smoothly. I was at the bridge. She had called Palenti to meet over there, kind of making it public, kind of pushing for a public push to get this thing done. And then Governor Dayton, and in my mind I thought, how many governors are going to go through, before this finally goes ahead? So it's really a good thing that, everybody finally got connected, and funding and all that kind of stuff took shape. So
It was definitely kind of an aligning of the stars that when that happened.
Well, thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
And stay for me. So Karl, in appreciation for your speaking presentation today, a donation to End Polio will be made in your name to End Polio Now, which is the signature project of Rotary International. In the early 1980s, there were 400,000 cases of polio in the world each year, and Rotary decided to join with other organizations to lead the eradication of polio. We are so close to eradicating this devastating disease. We have had only one case in 2016 on January 17th in Pakistan. At this time last year, we had 7 cases, and in 2015, we had 72 cases in 2 countries. So success over polio will help fuel the energy for what people of the world can do when we work together. And here is a certificate in appreciation of your speaking today. And here is a official End Polio Now Rotary pin. Thank you so much.